Hey everyone, today we're diving into one of the wildest, most bizarre chapters in all of financial history, Tulip Mania. This is a story that's got everything: a beautiful exotic flower, a mysterious virus, and a financial bubble so completely insane that its name has become a warning shot that still echoes today.
I mean, it really all boils down to this one kinda unbelievable question, right? How in the world did a simple flower in 17th century Holland become one of the most valuable assets on Earth? Well, the answer is a wild ride through human psychology and market madness.
At the absolute tippy top of the frenzy, this was the price. For one single bulb, the legendary Semper Augustus tulip. 10,000 guilders. Just let that sink in for a second.
Okay, so what does 10,000 guilders even mean back then? It means you could buy a magnificent, luxurious house right on a canal in the best part of Amsterdam. So the real question is, how on earth did we get here?
Well, our story doesn't actually start in the fields of Holland. Nope, it begins hundreds and hundreds of miles away, in the gardens of the Ottoman Empire. You know, the tulips' arrival in Europe was a pretty high-class affair. An ambassador first spotted them in the 1550s, and they were eventually brought to Holland by a famous botanist named Carolus Clusius. But Clusius was super protective of his rare bulbs. And here's the funny part. It was actually theft from his private garden that spread the tulips all across the Netherlands, kicking off what would become a national obsession.
Okay, but here's the real secret, the key to the whole mania. You see those gorgeous, flame-like patterns on the most expensive tulips? That wasn't a sign of a healthy flower. It was actually the symptom of a virus, the tulip-breaking virus, which infected the bulb and created these incredible, one-of-a-kind designs.
So you end up with this totally wild paradox. The very thing that made the tulips so stunningly beautiful and valuable was also the thing that made them sick, fragile, and incredibly hard to reproduce. It essentially turned gardening into a high-stakes, biological casino.
So, you've got this rare, beautiful new thing. But that's not enough to create a bubble. You need the perfect financial storm, and believe me, 17th century Holland was the perfect storm.
All right, so there are really three key ingredients that let this happen. First up, the Dutch were swimming in cash from global trade, and they were desperate for new ways to invest it. Second, and this is dark but important, a recent plague epidemic had created this kind of fatalistic, live for today, who cares about tomorrow attitude that made people much more willing to take huge risks. And last, in this society full of new money, owning rare tulips became the ultimate flex. It was the supercar or designer watch of its day. It screamed, "I've made it."
Okay, so the stage is set. Now let's look at how the trading itself just got, well, completely unhinged from reality. Here was the problem. You could only physically dig up and move tulip bulbs for a few months out of the year. So traders invented a new financial tool, futures contracts. People weren't even trading the flowers anymore. They were trading slips of paper that promised a tulip bulb months later. The Dutch had the perfect name for it, windhandel, which literally means wind trade. The game wasn't to get a tulip, it was to flip the paper contract for more money before you actually had to pay up.
And get this wind trade wasn't happening in some fancy official building. Nope, it was all going down in the back rooms of taverns. Picture it. Buyers and sellers are huddled together in these little clubs. Bids aren't shouted out, they're written quietly on chalk slates. And every time a deal is done, a fee called wine money is paid to buy drinks for everyone in the room. I mean, can you imagine? Alcohol is flowing, fortunes are being made. It was the perfect recipe for irrational, risky decisions.
And this quote from the time just says it all, doesn't it? It wasn't just about the money, it was about the status. Basically, if you were a person of means and you didn't have an expensive tulip collection, people thought you were unsophisticated. The peer pressure was real.
If you really want to feel the value, just look at this list. This is what was traded for one single Viceroy tulip bulb. We're talking tons of food, livestock, wine, beer, furniture, clothes. I mean, that's not just a shopping list. That's enough to sustain a family for years. All for a flower that might not even bloom.
But if that list wasn't enough, check this out. That single Viceroy bulb was worth about 2,500 guilders. Okay, now a skilled craftsman, someone at the absolute top of their profession, made about 300 guilders in an entire year. That is nearly a decade of hard work for one flower bulb. It's just mind-boggling.
Well, like any bubble that's built on nothing but hot air, or in this case wind, this one was bound to pop. And when it did, it was fast and it was brutal.
So, the music stopped on February 3rd, 1637, in a town called Haarlem. At a totally normal auction, a seller puts up some bulbs for sale and is met with, Nothing. Absolute silence. In that quiet moment, a wave of cold fear must have washed over the room. The party was over. What followed was pure panic. Everyone was desperately trying to sell, but suddenly, nobody was buying. In a matter of weeks, prices collapsed by more than 90%.
What followed was just total chaos. You had thousands of people holding these paper contracts that were worth a fortune just a month ago. The huge question was, are these legally binding debts, or are they just unenforceable gambling IOUs? And nobody knew the answer. The entire Dutch legal system just froze.
In the end, they came up with a pretty clever, if painful, solution. Basically, they said, okay, buyers, you can walk away from your crazy contracts, but you have to pay a small 3.5% regret fee. It kept the entire economy from completely melting down, but man, if you were a seller holding those contracts, you got absolutely wiped out.
So why are we still talking about a flower craze from almost 400 years ago? Because the story of Tulip Mania is more than just a weird bit of history. It's a timeless lesson.
What's really interesting, though, is how the story itself has been told over the years. For a long time, the popular myth was that this was just mass insanity, that everyone from nobles to chimney sweeps went bankrupt and ruined the entire Dutch economy. But modern historians went back and dug into the actual records. And the reality? It's a bit different. It was mostly a smaller group of wealthy merchants and artisans playing the game, and while people definitely lost money, it didn't cause a massive economic depression like the story says.
But the cultural impact was huge. You had artists painting these hilarious satires of traders as foolish monkeys. People created these stunningly beautiful catalogs to show off the flowers, which are now priceless artifacts. And hey, it even got turned into a major movie a few years back. The whole thing really left a mark.
And this right here is why this story is timeless. Just look at the chart. The pattern is exactly the same, again and again. The asset changes, a flower, an internet company, a digital token. The technology that fuels it changes, futures contracts, e-commerce, the blockchain. But the core story is identical. Prices skyrocket to insane levels, and it all comes crashing down when people lose faith.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that the stuff we trade might change, but people don't. Our own psychology, that mix of greed, our fear of missing out, our desire to get rich quick and show off, that part never changes. Which leaves us with one final lingering question. What will be our generation's tulip?